The hum of jet engines filled the cabin as passengers settled into their seats, preparing for a long-haul flight from New York to Los Angeles. The plane was packed, a mosaic of humanity bound together by shared skies and differing destinies. Among them sat Maya, an 8-year-old girl with wide, curious eyes and a shy smile, traveling alongside her mother, Priya. They wore traditional South Asian attire, Priya in a vibrant sari, and Maya in a colorful salwar kameez. Their presence added a splash of culture to the otherwise ordinary flight. Seated diagonally across the aisle was Lieutenant Jake "Tank" Thompson, a decorated Navy SEAL returning home after completing a grueling overseas mission. At 6'2" with broad shoulders and an air of quiet confidence, Jake stood out even in civilian clothes. He wasn't one for small talk but had a knack for reading people, a skill honed through years of high-stakes operations. As he flipped through a worn-out novel, his sharp gaze occasionally scanned the cabin, instinctively assessing his surroundings. Nearby, another passenger caught Jake's attention, a middle-aged man named Mark, whose restless energy seemed out of place. Dressed in a wrinkled suit, Mark tapped his foot impatiently against the floor, muttering under his breath about delays and cramped seating. His piercing glares toward nearby passengers hinted at simmering frustration. When he realized he'd be sitting next to Maya and her mom, his expression darkened further. As the plane ascended into the clouds, the atmosphere shifted subtly. Tension began to build, unnoticed by most but palpable to those paying attention. For now, the flight proceeded normally, but beneath the surface, cracks were forming. What started as harmless irritation would soon escalate into something far more sinister and unforgettable. The initial signs of trouble came subtly, almost imperceptibly. As the plane leveled off at cruising altitude, Mark shifted uncomfortably in his seat, shooting annoyed glances at Maya and her mother. His irritation stemmed not just from the cramped quarters but also from their presence. Specifically, the vibrant cultural attire they wore, which seemed to offend his narrow worldview. At first, it was small things. Exaggerated sighs as he adjusted his armrest, pointed coughs when Priya leaned over to help Maya buckle her seatbelt, and muttered complaints about people taking up too much space. No one paid much attention. Such behavior wasn't uncommon on crowded flights. But as time passed, Mark's demeanor grew increasingly hostile. When a flight attendant offered drinks, Mark snapped at her for bringing him diet soda instead of regular. "Can't you get anything right?" he barked, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. Embarrassed, the attendant apologized and quickly corrected the mistake, but the damage was done. Mark's rudeness left an uncomfortable silence hanging over the rows around him. Maya, sensing the tension, clung closer to her mom. She loved flying. The way the clouds looked like cotton candy outside the window, the hum of the engines that felt almost soothing. But today, something felt different. Her wide eyes darted nervously toward Mark, whose scowl deepened with every passing minute. The breaking point came when Maya reached into the overhead compartment to retrieve her favorite book, The Adventures of Amelia Earhart. In her excitement, she accidentally bumped Mark's shoulder while pulling the book down. It wasn't a hard hit, barely noticeable really, but it was enough to send him over the edge. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Mark exploded, turning to face her. His voice cut through the quiet cabin like a knife, startling everyone within earshot. "Watch where you're going, kid." Priya immediately stepped in, her voice calm but firm. "I'm so sorry," she said, gently guiding Maya back into her seat. "It was an accident." But Mark wasn't listening. Instead, he leaned forward, pointing a finger menacingly at Priya. "Maybe if you taught your daughter some manners, this wouldn't happen." Passengers began to stir uneasily, exchanging concerned looks. Some pretended not to notice, burying themselves in books or headphones, while others watched anxiously, unsure how far Mark would take his tirade. Then it happened. Without warning, Mark raised his hand and shoved Maya roughly, causing her to stumble backward into her seat. The sudden violence shocked everyone, including Jake, who had been observing the situation unfold from across the aisle. Priya gasped, tears welling up in her eyes as she pulled Maya close. "Why would you do that?" she demanded, her voice trembling with fear and anger. Mark sneered, unfazed by the growing murmurs of disapproval around him. "Maybe now you'll learn to keep your brat in line," he spat, crossing his arms smugly. For a moment, the cabin fell silent, the weight of what had just occurred sinking in. Passengers exchanged horrified glances, torn between outrage and disbelief. No one knew what to do, or worse, whether they should intervene at all. That's when Jake stood up. Jake didn't hesitate. Years of training had taught him to act decisively in moments of crisis, and this was no exception. With steady, deliberate movements, he unbuckled his seatbelt and stood, towering over Mark's row. His presence alone commanded attention, drawing every eye in the cabin toward him. "Sir," Jake said firmly, his voice low but authoritative. "That's enough." Mark turned to glare at him, clearly irritated by the interruption. "Stay out of this, buddy. This doesn't concern you." "It does now," Jake replied, his tone leaving no room for argument. He took a step closer, positioning himself between Mark and Maya's family. "You've already caused enough trouble. Sit down and calm yourself before things get worse." For a moment, Mark hesitated, taken aback by Jake's imposing stature and unyielding demeanor. But then his face twisted into a sneer, and he leaned forward aggressively. "Or what? You gonna stop me?" Without missing a beat, Jake locked eyes with him, his expression unwavering. "If I have to." The tension in the cabin became almost unbearable. Passengers held their breath, unsure of what would happen next. Mark, emboldened by misplaced confidence, decided to test Jake's resolve. With a snarl, he lunged forward, attempting to shove past Jake to reach Maya and her mother again. But Jake was ready. In one fluid motion, he intercepted Mark, using controlled self-defense techniques to restrain him without causing harm. Grabbing Mark's wrist firmly yet carefully, Jake twisted it behind his back just enough to immobilize him. Mark yelped in surprise, struggling briefly before realizing resistance was futile. "Easy there," Jake warned, his voice calm but firm. "Don't make this harder on yourself." By now, the entire cabin was watching, some passengers audibly gasping while others cheered quietly. A flight attendant rushed over, visibly shaken but determined to regain control of the situation. "Sir, please let us handle this," she pleaded, glancing nervously at Jake. "I'm not letting him near them again," Jake replied, nodding toward Maya and her mom. "Not until we land." Realizing the gravity of the situation, the flight attendants sprang into action. Two of them approached cautiously, flanking Jake as they addressed Mark. "Sir, we need you to sit back in your seat and remain calm," one of them instructed, her voice trembling slightly. Mark, still restrained by Jake, shot daggers at everyone around him. "This isn't over," he growled under his breath, though his bravado had noticeably diminished. Once assured that Mark posed no immediate threat, Jake released him, but only after ensuring the man returned to his seat under close supervision. The flight attendants stationed themselves nearby, keeping a watchful eye on Mark for the remainder of the flight. As the adrenaline began to subside, Jake turned to check on Maya and her mom. Kneeling beside their seats, he offered a reassuring smile. "Are you both okay?" Priya nodded, tears streaming down her face as she clutched Maya tightly. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the hum of the engines. "We don't know what would have happened if you hadn't stepped in." Maya peeked up at Jake, her wide eyes filled with a mix of awe and relief. "You're like a superhero," she murmured shyly. Jake chuckled softly, brushing off the compliment. "Just doing my job, kiddo." His humility only endeared him further to the passengers, many of whom erupted into applause. Some even stood to shake his hand or pat him on the shoulder, expressing gratitude for his bravery. One elderly woman handed him a tissue, dabbing at her own eyes. "God bless you, young man," she said earnestly. Meanwhile, several passengers had whipped out their phones, capturing footage of the aftermath. Videos of Jake standing tall against Mark's aggression quickly made their way onto social media platforms, sparking outrage and admiration worldwide. As the initial shock of the incident began to settle, the cabin transformed into a scene of collective relief and gratitude. Passengers who had previously sat frozen in fear now found their voices, expressing support for Maya and her mother while condemning Mark's behavior. The atmosphere shifted from tension to solidarity, with Jake at the center of it all. A quiet but undeniable hero. One teenager, sitting a few rows behind Jake, held up her phone, capturing shaky yet compelling footage of the confrontation. Her video started with Mark's explosive outburst and ended with Jake calmly restraining him, his commanding presence unmistakable even in the dim lighting of the cabin. She posted it on social media with the caption, "Real-life superhero stops racist attack on flight. Thank you, Navy SEAL." Within minutes, the video went viral. Social media erupted as users around the world shared and commented on the clip. Hashtags like #Hero on a Plane, #Justice for Maya, and #Stand Against Racism trended globally. People praised Jake's quick thinking and courage, calling him the definition of bravery and a true American hero. Memes and fan art featuring Jake flooded platforms like Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, turning him into an overnight sensation. Back on the plane, passengers continued to rally around Maya and her mom. An elderly woman seated across the aisle leaned over to comfort Priya, patting her hand gently. "Don't let that man ruin your day," she said kindly. "You have every right to be here, just like anyone else." Others chimed in, offering words of encouragement. A businessman traveling in first class sent drinks and snacks to Maya's family, along with a note that read, "To the bravest little girl I've ever seen, don't let ignorance dim your light." Even the flight attendants made extra efforts to ensure the family felt safe, checking on them frequently and bringing Maya a plush toy from the gift shop to cheer her up. Meanwhile, Jake remained humble amidst the praise. When a passenger approached him to thank him personally, he simply shrugged and said, "Anyone would have done the same." But the truth was, not everyone would have, and that's what made his actions so remarkable. His willingness to step in, despite the potential risks, inspired countless others to reflect on their own capacity to stand up against injustice. The viral video also sparked broader conversations about racism and discrimination. News outlets picked up the story, interviewing experts on how to combat prejudice in public spaces. Celebrities weighed in, sharing messages of support for Maya and her family while amplifying calls for accountability. One actor tweeted, "This is why we need more people like Lieutenant Thompson in the world, people who refuse to stay silent when they see hate." Even schools got involved. Teachers used the incident as a teaching moment, discussing the importance of empathy and standing up for others. Kids everywhere identified with Maya, imagining how scary it must have been to face such hostility. Parents praised Jake as a role model, someone who showed that strength isn't about aggression. It's about protecting those who can't protect themselves. By the time the plane touched down in Los Angeles, the story had reached millions. Reporters waited eagerly outside the terminal, hoping to catch a glimpse of Jake, Maya, and her mom. As passengers disembarked, many stopped to shake Jake's hand or hug Maya, promising never to forget the day they witnessed a real-life hero in action. But for Maya, the experience left a lasting impression, not because of the fear she felt during the attack, but because of the kindness she saw afterward. Strangers had stood up for her, cheered for her, and reminded her that she belonged in this world, no matter what anyone said. And Jake? He had shown her that heroes weren't just in books. They walked among us, ready to act when needed most. As the plane taxied to a stop at the gate, the tension that had gripped the cabin for hours finally began to ease, but not for Mark. His actions had set off a chain reaction that would soon spiral far beyond anything he could have anticipated. Airport security personnel were already waiting when the door opened, alerted by the flight crew about the incident. Passengers disembarked quickly, eager to put the ordeal behind them, but Mark wasn't going anywhere, not without an escort. Two uniformed officers boarded the plane and approached Mark's seat. "Sir, please come with us," one of them said firmly, gesturing toward the aisle. Mark hesitated, his face flushed with indignation. "This is ridiculous," he protested, raising his voice. "I didn't do anything wrong." But no one was buying it. Several passengers stepped forward voluntarily to corroborate what had happened, recounting how Mark had verbally abused Maya and her mother before physically assaulting the young girl. Jake provided a detailed account as well, emphasizing the need for accountability. "He needs to understand the impact of his actions," Jake told the officers quietly. "Not just on the victims, but on everyone who witnessed it." Once off the plane, Mark was taken to a holding area where authorities conducted a thorough investigation. Video footage from passengers' phones played a crucial role in documenting the events, leaving little room for denial. The viral video, now viewed millions of times online, served as irrefutable evidence of Mark's behavior. As public outrage continued to grow, so did the pressure on law enforcement to hold him accountable. Legal charges followed swiftly. Mark was arrested and charged with assault, disorderly conduct, and hate crimes, a combination of offenses that carried significant penalties. Prosecutors highlighted the racial motivation behind his attack, noting how his comments and actions targeted Maya and her mother specifically because of their cultural identity. During court proceedings, Maya's family testified about the emotional toll the incident had taken on them, describing sleepless nights and lingering anxiety. Their courage in speaking out resonated deeply with the judge and jury. Mark's defense attorney attempted to downplay the severity of the situation, claiming his client was simply having a bad day. But the argument fell flat in the face of overwhelming evidence and public sentiment. Witnesses described Mark's blatant hostility, while experts testified about the broader implications of allowing such behavior to go unpunished. "This isn't just about one man's actions," said a civil rights advocate during the trial. "It's about sending a message that racism and violence will not be tolerated in our society." Ultimately, Mark was found guilty on all counts. He received a hefty fine, mandatory anger management counseling, and a suspended sentence with probation. However, the consequences extended far beyond the courtroom. Once his name and face became associated with the viral video, Mark faced widespread backlash. Employers distanced themselves from him, friends stopped answering his calls, and strangers recognized him in public, often confronting him with harsh words or glares. His reputation was irreparably tarnished, serving as a stark reminder of the cost of prejudice. In addition to legal repercussions, Mark's past came under scrutiny. Journalists dug into his background, uncovering a pattern of discriminatory behavior. Former colleagues reported instances of racist remarks and exclusionary practices at work, painting a picture of someone who had long harbored intolerant views. These revelations further fueled public disdain, turning Mark into a symbol of everything wrong with unchecked bigotry. For Maya and her family, justice felt bittersweet. While they were relieved to see accountability, the experience left scars that wouldn't fade easily. Yet, they also found solace in the outpouring of support from strangers around the world. Messages of love and encouragement poured in daily, reminding them they weren't alone. One letter stood out. "Your strength inspires us to stand up against hate in all its forms. You are heroes too." The incident served as a catalyst for change, sparking discussions about systemic racism and the importance of bystander intervention. Organizations dedicated to combating discrimination gained traction, using Mark's case as a teaching tool to educate others about the dangers of prejudice. Meanwhile, Maya's story inspired countless individuals to speak up when they saw injustice, proving that even small acts of courage could make a difference. Let me know when you're ready to move on to Section 6. The Hero's Humility and Legacy. Smiling face with smiling eyes. NXT. Profile. Quen 2.5 Max. 6. The Hero's Humility and Legacy, 600 to 700 words. Despite the global attention and praise, Lieutenant Jake Thompson remained steadfastly humble. For him, stepping in to protect Maya and her mother wasn't an act of heroism. It was simply the right thing to do. When reporters swarmed him at the airport, eager for sound bites and exclusive interviews, Jake deflected the spotlight with characteristic modesty. "I'm not a hero," he told them firmly, his voice calm but resolute. "I'm just someone who saw something wrong and decided to help. Anyone else in my position would have done the same." But the world didn't see it that way. To millions of people, Jake represented everything good about humanity. courage, selflessness, and a willingness to stand up for what's right. His actions inspired countless stories of ordinary people taking small but meaningful steps to combat racism and intolerance in their own lives. Social media users shared anecdotes of standing up against bullies, defending marginalized friends, or simply educating themselves on issues of bias and prejudice. Jake's humility only deepened the public's admiration for him. In interviews, he avoided talking about himself, instead focusing on broader themes of empathy and accountability. "It's not about being a Navy SEAL or having special training," he explained during one televised appearance. "It's about recognizing our shared responsibility to look out for each other. We're all human beings, and we owe it to one another to create a world where everyone feels safe and valued." His words resonated deeply, striking a chord with audiences across generations. Schools invited him to speak at assemblies, where students hung on his every word, asking questions like, "Were you scared? And what should I do if I see something like that?" Jake answered honestly, encouraging kids to trust their instincts and find strength in unity. "You don't have to fight alone," he told them. "Sometimes, standing up means speaking up, or even just being there for someone who needs support." The airline also honored Jake publicly, presenting him with a lifetime travel pass as a token of gratitude for his bravery. At a ceremony attended by executives, employees, and passengers alike, they praised him as a shining example of integrity and compassion. "Lieutenant Thompson reminded us all of the power of kindness and courage," said the CEO in a heartfelt speech. "We are proud to call him one of our own." Yet, despite the accolades, Jake refused to let fame change him. He returned to his quiet life, continuing to serve his country with the same dedication that had defined his career. Off-duty, he spent time mentoring young veterans, sharing lessons learned from both military service and civilian life. Many of these men went on to become advocates for social justice, inspired by Jake's belief in using privilege and influence for good. Over time, Jake's story became more than just a viral moment. It evolved into a legacy of hope and resilience. People began referring to him as the man who reminded us how to be human, a title that made him chuckle whenever he heard it. "I'm just doing my part," he'd say with a shrug. "The real heroes are the ones who keep fighting every day, even when no one's watching." For Maya and her family, Jake's impact extended far beyond the flight. Inspired by his example, they founded a nonprofit organization called Wings of Unity, dedicated to promoting cultural understanding and combating discrimination. Through workshops, school programs, and community events, they aim to turn the pain of their experience into a force for positive change. Maya herself blossomed under the weight of her newfound purpose. Once shy and reserved, she now spoke confidently about her journey, urging others to embrace diversity and reject hate. "If Lieutenant Jake can stand up for me, then I can stand up for someone else," she said during a TEDx talk that brought audiences to tears. "We're stronger together." Years later, Jake crossed paths with Maya again at a fundraising gala for Wings of Unity. Now a teenager, Maya greeted him with a warm hug, her eyes shining with gratitude. "You saved me," she said softly. "No, Maya," Jake replied with a gentle smile. "You saved yourself, and everyone else who heard your story." As they stood side by side, surrounded by supporters and allies, it was clear that the ripple effects of that fateful flight would continue to spread for years to come. Jake may have been the catalyst, but the true heroes were the countless individuals who chose to carry the torch of justice forward, lighting the path toward a brighter, more inclusive future. Months turned into years, and the memory of that turbulent flight faded for most, but its impact lingered in profound ways. For Maya, the once shy girl who had been thrust into the spotlight, life transformed in unexpected directions. The incident became a turning point, shaping her into a confident advocate for equality and kindness. She often spoke at schools and community events, sharing her story to inspire others to stand up against hate. Her nonprofit organization, Wings of Unity, flourished under her family's leadership, reaching thousands of people worldwide with its message of acceptance and resilience. Maya's mother, Priya, found renewed purpose as well. What had started as a personal tragedy evolved into an opportunity to educate others about cultural diversity. Together, They traveled across the country, hosting workshops and collaborating with organizations dedicated to ending racism. Their efforts earned them recognition as voices of change, but more importantly, they created safe spaces where people could learn, grow, and connect. As for Jake, his life remained largely unchanged, exactly how he preferred it. He continued serving in the Navy SEALs, carrying out missions with the same quiet determination that had defined his career. Yet, his actions on that flight left an indelible mark on those around him. Strangers still approached him occasionally, thanking him for inspiring them to act when faced with injustice. Some shared stories of standing up for bullied classmates or intervening during heated arguments, crediting Jake's example for giving them the courage to step forward. Jake's philosophy, that heroism isn't about grand gestures but small acts of decency, became a guiding principle for many. It reminded people that even in moments of fear or uncertainty, doing the right thing can make all the difference. His humility resonated deeply, proving that true strength lies not in seeking glory but in lifting others up. The ripple effects of that day reached far beyond the individuals directly involved. Conversations sparked by the viral video led to tangible changes in policies and attitudes. Airlines implemented stricter protocols to address onboard conflicts, ensuring passengers felt safer while traveling. Schools incorporated lessons on bystander intervention into their curricula, teaching students the importance of speaking out against discrimination. Communities rallied together, organizing events to celebrate diversity and foster understanding. For Maya, reflecting on the journey brought both pride and perspective. That flight was scary, but it taught me something important, she said during a speech years later. It showed me that even in the darkest moments, there are always people willing to shine a light, and sometimes, those lights come from the most unexpected places. Jake, too, reflected on the experience privately. Though he never sought recognition, he couldn't deny the role it played in reminding him of why he chose a life of service. Protecting others wasn't just part of his job. It was a calling, one that transcended uniforms and titles. In the end, the story wasn't just about a single act of bravery. It was about the collective power of humanity to rise above hatred and division. Maya, Jake, and countless others had shown that courage comes in many forms, and that standing up for what's right, no matter how daunting, creates ripples of hope that extend far beyond ourselves. And so, as planes soared through the skies above, carrying passengers bound for destinations unknown, the legacy of that fateful flight lived on, a testament to the enduring strength of compassion, unity, and the belief that we're all better when we look out for one another.